The 60-story Pinnacle Tower gleamed against Chicago's skyline, its glass facade reflecting wealth and power. Inside, at 2 a.m., Isaiah Coleman pushed a mop across the marble lobby, his reflection distorted in the polished floor. At 55, Isaiah's broad shoulders and calloused hands told a story of grit, but his gray custodian's uniform marked him as invisible to the tower's elite tenants, lawyers, CEOs, and financiers who barely glanced his way. To them, he was just the black janitor, a shadow cleaning their messes. But Isaiah was no ordinary worker. He was the silent owner of Pinnacle Tower, a real estate titan who'd built a fortune from nothing, now undercover to protect his legacy. Isaiah's days were filled with slights. As he emptied trash cans, a young lawyer, Bradley Kent, tossed a coffee cup at his feet, smirking, "Don't miss that one, old man." The word boy wasn't said, but it lingered in Bradley's tone. Isaiah's jaw clenched, but he nodded, his eyes sharp. He'd grown up in Chicago's South Side, where dreams were crushed under systemic racism, denied loans, redlined homes, teachers who saw his blackness as a limit. Yet he'd risen, buying properties, building Pinnacle, all while staying anonymous to avoid the spotlight. Now he was here for a reason. Whispers of a plot to seize control of his tower through forged documents and insider deals. Isaiah's cover as a custodian was deliberate. Rumors had reached him. Tenants like Bradley and Cynthia Holt, a ruthless property manager, were colluding to falsify ownership records, claiming Pinnacle for themselves. They thought the true owner was a distant billionaire, not the man they mocked. Isaiah's plan was simple, but dangerous. Blend in, listen, gather proof. His old friend, Lena, a retired accountant, had tipped him off, and he carried a hidden recorder to capture their schemes. Tonight, as he cleaned the executive floor, he overheard Cynthia in a heated call. "The signatures are ready. We'll own this place by next month?" His heart raced. The game was on. The lobby grew quiet, but the air was thick with tension. Bradley lingered, eyeing Isaiah as he polished a railing. "You're slow tonight, janitor," he sneered, tossing a crumpled napkin. Isaiah bent to pick it up, his recorder catching Bradley's next words. "Once we flip this building, I'm set for life." Isaiah's blood boiled, but he stayed calm, his mind cataloging every detail. He wasn't just cleaning floors. He was building a case to save his empire. As he pushed his cart to the service elevator, Cynthia's voice echoed from her office, mentioning the board meeting. Isaiah knew that was his next target. But as he stepped into the elevator, a security guard watched him too closely, his radio crackling. Had they noticed his lingering? Isaiah gripped the mop handle, his resolve ironclad. He'd fought too hard to lose now, and he'd expose their greed, no matter the cost. Isaiah's nights were a blur of mopping, scrubbing, and listening. The Pinnacle Tower's gleaming halls hid a cesspool of greed, and he was knee-deep in it. His custodian's uniform was his cloak, letting him slip through unnoticed, but every shift was a tightrope walk. Cynthia Holt's words from the previous night, "We all own this place," echoed in his mind, fueling his mission. The recorder in his pocket was his lifeline, capturing fragments of the conspiracy to steal his skyscraper. But fragments weren't enough. He needed hard evidence, documents, emails, anything to prove Bradley Kent and Cynthia were forging ownership records. At 3 a.m., the executive floor was silent, save for the hum of Isaiah's floor buffer. He worked near Cynthia's office, where she often stayed late. Through the glass door, he saw her hunched over her desk, papers strewn about. She was on the phone, her voice low but sharp. "The lawyer's ready to backdate the deeds. Get the board on board, Bradley." Isaiah's recorder whirred, catching every word. His heart pounded. This was the proof he needed, but it was only a start. He needed those papers. As he buffed closer, Cynthia's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "What's that noise?" she barked into the phone, then stood, peering out. Isaiah ducked behind a potted plant, his breath shallow. She didn't see him, but the close call stung. Back in the break room, Isaiah replayed the recording, his hands trembling. The mention of deeds and the board confirmed his fears. They were moving fast. He thought of Lena, his old friend who'd first warned him. She'd worked in Pinnacle's accounting department before retiring, spotting discrepancies in property filings. Isaiah had trusted her enough to go undercover, but he couldn't risk contacting her now, not with security tightening. The guard from last night, a burly man named Vince, had started trailing him, checking his cart, asking pointed questions. Isaiah's anonymity was fraying. He needed an ally inside. His thoughts turned to Jamal, a young black security guard who'd shown him kindness, sharing coffee during late shifts. Jamal had mentioned his sister's struggle in a neighborhood like Isaiah's old one, underfunded, overlooked. Could he trust him? Isaiah decided to test the waters. During a break, he approached Jamal, keeping it casual. "Heard anything about the tower changing hands?" he asked, wiping down a table. Jamal frowned. "Rumors, yeah. Cynthia's been cagey, meeting with suits at odd hours." Isaiah nodded, planting a seed. "Keep an ear out, man. Something's not right." Jamal's eyes lingered, curious but cautious. As Isaiah cleaned the boardroom later, he found a discarded memo, unsigned, but it mentioned a transfer vote at the upcoming board meeting. His pulse quickened. If he could get into that meeting, he might catch them red-handed, but custodians didn't waltz into boardrooms. He'd need a plan, and fast. As he left, Vince the guard stood by the elevator staring. "Late night, Coleman?" he said, his tone heavy. Isaiah shrugged, playing the weary janitor. But inside he was a lion, ready to roar. His tower, his legacy was at stake, and he'd fight for it with every ounce of his soul. Isaiah's mop moved rhythmically across the 50th floor hallway, but his mind was elsewhere, piecing together the conspiracy threatening his empire. The memo he'd found, a cryptic note about a transfer vote, was tucked inside his uniform, a ticking clock urging him to act. The board meeting was in 2 days, and Cynthia Holt and Bradley Kent were poised to forge documents claiming Pinnacle Tower. Isaiah, the secret owner, had to infiltrate that meeting, but as a custodian, he was as welcome in the boardroom as a storm in a penthouse. His recorder held damning snippets, but he needed the forged deeds themselves to bury them. The morning shift was brutal. Bradley, strutting through the lobby, flicked a pen at Isaiah's cart, laughing, "Keep it shiny, janitor." The jab cut, stirring memories of Isaiah's father, a factory worker demeaned daily for his blackness. Isaiah had built Pinnacle to rewrite that story, to give his community a beacon of hope. Now he channeled that pain into focus. He'd overheard Cynthia mention a safe in her office, likely where the forged documents were kept. If he could access it, he'd have the proof to end this. Isaiah turned to Jamal, the security guard. During a quiet moment in the basement, he took a risk. "Jamal, you ever feel like this place is hiding something?" he asked, scrubbing a sink. Jamal leaned in, his voice low. "Yeah, man. Cynthia's been locking her office, meeting with Bradley and some lawyer. I saw files marked Pinnacle Transfer. Shady, right?" Isaiah's heart leapt. Jamal was observant, maybe loyal. "If you see those files, could you look the other way?" Isaiah said carefully. Jamal's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "For my sister's neighborhood, I'd do a lot." It wasn't a promise, but it was enough. That night, Isaiah slipped onto the executive floor, his cart a prop. Cynthia's office was locked, but he'd spent years studying this building. Every vent, every blind spot. He pried open an air duct, crawling through to drop into her office. The safe was behind a painting, its dial glinting. He'd learned basic lock-picking in his youth, a skill born of survival. His hands steadied, but the safe wouldn't budge. Then he heard footsteps. Vince, the guard, patrolling too close. Isaiah hid under the desk, his breath silent as Vince's flashlight swept the room. The guard left, but Isaiah's window was closing. Back in the duct, he cursed himself. The safe was a dead end without the combination. But Jamal's words stuck, files marked Pinnacle Transfer. If they were on Cynthia's desk, he could try again tomorrow. As he emerged, Jamal was there, his face unreadable. "You're no janitor, are you?" he said quietly. Isaiah froze, then gambled. "I'm someone who wants justice. Help me, and I'll make it right." Jamal hesitated, then handed him a key card. "Cynthia's office, tomorrow night. Don't make me regret this." Isaiah nodded, the weight of trust heavy. The board meeting loomed, and with it, his chance to strike. He wasn't just fighting for Pinnacle. He was fighting for every black dream trampled by greed. Isaiah's hands trembled as he pocketed Jamal's key card, its plastic edge sharp with possibility. The board meeting was tomorrow, and Cynthia Holt and Bradley Kent were ready to push their forged deeds through, claiming Pinnacle Tower as their own. Isaiah, the tower's secret owner, was running out of time. The key card could get him into Cynthia's office, where the documents, or their digital backups, likely waited. But Jamal's trust was a fragile thread, and Vince, the security guard, was circling closer, his radio chatter mentioning suspicious activity. Isaiah's Custodian cover was fraying, and one misstep could end it all. He worked his shift with mechanical precision, mopping floors while his mind raced. The key card burned in his pocket, a reminder of the risk he'd take tonight. Bradley passed him in the hall, tossing a gum wrapper at his feet with a smirk. "Stay in your lane, janitor," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. Isaiah's fist clenched, but he nodded, channeling his rage into resolve. He'd grown up dodging insults like bullets, his blackness a target in a world that saw him as less. Pinnacle was his defiance, his proof that he could rise. He wouldn't let them steal it. At midnight, the tower was a ghost town. Isaiah slipped to the executive floor, the key card granting him entry to Cynthia's office. The room smelled of lavender and ambition, her desk cluttered with files. He searched frantically, finding a folder labeled Pinnacle Transfer. Inside were drafts of forged deeds, but no originals. His heart sank until he spotted her laptop still on. He plugged in a USB drive, copying files, but the progress bar crawled. Voices outside made him freeze, Vince and Cynthia arguing. "I saw that janitor near here last night," Vince growled. "Check the cameras," Cynthia snapped. Isaiah's pulse surged. He yanked the USB out, incomplete, and hid in a closet as the door opened. Cynthia's heels clicked closer, her voice sharp. "If he's snooping, fire him. We can't risk it before the vote." Isaiah held his breath, the USB slick in his hand. She left, and he slipped out, heart pounding. The partial files were something, but not enough. He needed the originals, likely in the safe he couldn't crack. As he reached the service elevator, Jamal appeared, his face tense. "Vince is on to you," he whispered. "I stalled him, but you gotta move." Isaiah nodded, gratitude mixing with fear. "Why help me?" he asked. Jamal's eyes hardened. "Because my family deserves better than their scraps." Back in his tiny apartment, Isaiah reviewed the USB. It held emails between Cynthia and a lawyer, hinting at bribes to board members, but nothing concrete. The board meeting was hours away, and he needed a plan to crash it. He could reveal himself as the owner, but that would tip his hand too soon. Instead, he'd use the meeting's chaos, slipping in as a custodian. The key card was his edge, but Vince's suspicion and Cynthia's paranoia were closing in. Isaiah thought of his parents, their sacrifices, and the kids in his old neighborhood. This wasn't just his fight, it was theirs. He'd face the boardroom, and he'd win. The Pinnacle Tower's boardroom was a fortress of glass and steel, its long table gleaming under fluorescent lights. Isaiah stood outside, his custodian's card a flimsy shield, the key card and USB drive heavy in his pocket. In hours, Cynthia Holt and Bradley Kent would present their forged deeds, claiming his skyscraper. Isaiah, the secret owner, had to stop them, but crashing a board meeting as a janitor was a desperate play. His recorder held their damning words, the USB partial proof, but without the original documents, his case was thin. He needed to get inside, expose their lies, and pray Jamal's loyalty held. The morning was chaos. Cynthia barked orders, her eyes scanning the staff, lingering on Isaiah. "You, janitor! Clean the boardroom now!" she snapped, her voice edged with suspicion. Isaiah nodded, heart racing. This was his chance. Inside, board members milled about, their suits crisp, their chatter smug. Bradley was there, smirking as he reviewed papers, likely the forged deeds. Isaiah mopped slowly, his recorder on, catching Bradley's whisper to a board member. "Once we vote, the tower's ours." Isaiah's blood boiled, but he stayed invisible, just another black worker they ignored. He needed those deeds. Cynthia's laptop, left open on the table, was a beacon. Using the key card, he'd accessed her office last night, but the safe remained locked. Now, he saw a folder by her chair, marked Pinnacle Ownership. His fingers itched, but Vince, the guard, hovered nearby, his radio crackling. Isaiah moved closer, pretending to wipe a spill, and swiped the folder into his cart. He slipped to a storage closet, heart pounding, and opened it. Blank pages. A trap. Cynthia's voice cut through. "Looking for something, janitor?" She stood in the doorway, Vince behind her, his hand on his radio. Isaiah's mind raced. "Just cleaning, ma'am," he said, but Cynthia's smile was venomous. "Search him," she ordered. Vince found the recorder, but not the USB, hidden in Isaiah's shoe. "He's spying," Cynthia hissed, snatching the recorder. Isaiah's cover was blown, but he saw an opening. "You're stealing this tower," he said, loud enough for nearby board members to hear. Cynthia laughed, but doubt flickered in their eyes. Bradley stormed in, face red. "He's nobody! Fire him!" But Isaiah stood tall. "Check the ownership records, the real ones," he said, bluffing. A board member hesitated, intrigued. Cynthia dragged him to security, but the seed was planted. In the holding room, Isaiah overheard Vince on the radio. "Jamal's not responding." Hope surged. Jamal was stalling. Isaiah had one move left. Reveal himself as the owner. It would end his cover but might stop the vote. As Cynthia gloated, waving the recorder, Isaiah made his choice. "You don't know who I am," he said, his voice steady. "But you will." The board meeting was starting, and Isaiah was ready to fight, not just for Pinnacle, but for every black soul told they didn't belong. Isaiah sat in the security office, wrists cuffed, the air thick with Cynthia Holt's smug triumph. She waved his recorder, taunting, "You thought you could outsmart us, janitor?" Bradley Kent paced nearby, his confidence shaken by Isaiah's boardroom outburst. The forged deeds were moments from being voted on, handing Pinnacle Tower to their greedy hands. But Isaiah, the tower's true owner, wasn't done. The USB in his shoe held partial proof, and Jamal's absence from security's radio gave him hope. He'd built this skyscraper for his community, a monument to black resilience, and he'd burn it down before letting them steal it. Cynthia played the recorder, expecting a knockout blow, but Isaiah had swapped it with a decoy, filled with meaningless chatter. Her face twisted in rage. "Where's the real one?" she snarled. Isaiah stayed silent, his eyes locked on hers. He'd endured their slurs, their disdain, to protect his legacy. Now it was time to strike. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice calm but iron hard. "Check the ownership records, public filings, not your fakes." Cynthia laughed, but a board member, overhearing through the open door, frowned. "What's he talking about?" they asked. The board meeting was starting, and Isaiah saw his moment. "I'm Isaiah Coleman," he declared, standing despite the cuffs. "I own Pinnacle Tower." Cynthia froze, Bradley paled, and the board member's eyes widened. Vince hesitated, unsure. Isaiah pressed on. "Call Lena Washington, retired accountant. She'll confirm it." The board member, skeptical but curious, made the call. Lena's voice boomed over speakerphone, detailing Isaiah's secret ownership, his years of anonymous deals to build an empire for his people. The room went silent, Cynthia's smugness crumbling. Jamal burst in, holding the forged deeds he'd swiped from Cynthia's safe, using his security access. "These are fake," he said, tossing them to the board member. Isaiah nodded, gratitude in his eyes. The USB, now retrieved, was handed over, its emails exposing Cynthia and Bradley's bribes and schemes. The board halted the vote, and police swarmed in, alerted by Lena. Cynthia and Bradley were cuffed, their empire of lies collapsing. The tower's tenants, once dismissive, now watched in awe as Isaiah stood tall, no longer the janitor but the titan. Isaiah addressed a crowd outside Pinnacle days later, his voice ringing, "This tower is for us, for every black child told they re-nothing." The cheers were deafening, his victory a beacon. Pinnacle's profits were redirected to Southside schools, proving his fight was bigger than himself.